Tonight we are going to be telling you about the harmful impacts of Fred Phelps. We will tell you about himself, his effects, the Constitution, what people have tried, and our solution to this problem. Fred Phelps was born on November 13, 1929. Currently, he is the pastor at Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas, according to the New York Times. If you saw him on the street, you might think he looks like any other 81-year-old man. However, he is definitely not like any other American citizen. His church's members are mostly his children and grandchildren. The church consists of only about 75 members. These members are known for conducting anti-homosexual picketing in Topeka and other cities since 1991, according to the Wichita Eagle. In recent years, they have begun picketing at military funerals, reasoning and screaming that military deaths are the work of a wrathful God who punishes the United States for allowing homosexuality. They have attended more than 600 funerals of soldiers. They reason that if they get the message across that if the military stops accepting homosexuals, soldiers will stop dying, according to ABC News. His followers argue that it is their sacred duty to warn others of God's angers. They preach with slogans like "Thank God for 9/11," "God hates fags," and "AIDS cures fags." His views can be gauged by his website, godhatesfags.com. Fred Phelps' followers claim that they are protected by the First Amendment when criticized. The protests, viewed by many as cruel and unpatriotic, have set off a wave of outrage and a great amount of laws that seek to restrict demonstrations at funerals and burials. But in March 2011, the Supreme Court ruled 8-1 that the First Amendment protected the church's right to stage the protests. The decision upheld an appeals court ruling that they threw out a $5 million judgment to the father of a dead Marine who sued church members after they picketed at his son's funeral. However, some cases are different. But now that we have told you about Fred Phelps, we will be telling you about his extreme impact on American society.
All right, now we're going to be talking about the impact of the First Amendment. The first of my sources is, of course, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, which says, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievances." The reason this is my first source is that the freedom of speech and the violation and impingement of others' rights are in a constant clash or tug of war. Our group is in a unanimous agreement as to the harm, hurt, and violation that Fred Phelps and his organization thrust upon those that they demonstrate against. Some of us have even had personal experience with them, myself included. West's Encyclopedia of American Law gives us an understandable perspective. Democracies have grappled with the issue of whether any limits can be placed upon the expression of beliefs and ideas, even dating back to Greece and Socrates. Almost since the adoption of the Bill of Rights, the judiciary has struggled to define speech, expression, and the extent to which they should be protected. There are a few who believe that the freedom of speech is absolute, but most hold to the interpretation of law being the allowance of some restrictions. The limit we wish to address is that of inciting or provocative speech, often called fighting words. Since the 1980s, many attempts have been made to regulate or ban hate speech. The U.S. Supreme Court has generally invalidated such laws on the ground that they infringe upon First Amendment rights. In almost all legal cases that I looked at, decisions were rendered on the side of protecting the free speech. There is, however, the instance of words spoken specifically to incite the recipient to acts of violence. One example that demonstrates how this works is the judgment of the case of Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, which is case number 255, which was an appeal decision from the Supreme Court of New Hampshire, argued February 5, 1942, and decided on March 9 of 1942. In this particular case, a decision was upheld that convicted a person of the use of offensive words, quoted as "damned fascist" and "damned racketeer," in a public place as a breach of peace because the words were spoken intending to provoke the addressed to violence. As you can see, the problem is not with how to stop Fred Phelps and his group, but how to continue to protect all of our constitutional right to free speech while limiting the damage done by that freedom of speech upon the recipients. So now, let's continue on with examining how that's been done so far.
The harmful effects of Fred Phelps have not only affected the homosexual community, but many Americans and their families. Fred Phelps openly talks about his hatred for the homosexual community. During an interview with the Washington Post in 1995, Phelps had extremely inappropriate comments to say, including things like, "fag is a good Bible word." His protest signs that are often seen outside other churches and funerals say things such as, "Thank God for AIDS," and "fags burn in hell." Not only does Fred Phelps target pro-gay citizens and military families, but any organization that does not openly condemn homosexuality, including fellow churches. At one point in time, the members of Phelps's congregation attacked the pastor of First Lutheran Church, General Weeks. Eventually, Phelps's sons were charged with battery, but no further legal action was taken.
Now that we have just discussed the individuals that have acted out against Fred Phelps, I will now discuss an organization that have responded towards Fred Phelps. In response to Fred Phelps' protesting, some citizens have formed their own group called Patriot Guard Riders. According to Fox News, they are more than 5,000 members. The bikers, their job is to shield the families of dead soldiers from protesters and overshadow the hurtful words with patriotic chants and a sea of red, white, and blue flags while at the funerals. According to Time, the Patriot Guard formed because of Fred Phelps, but now the whole focus is off Fred Phelps and is more about the troop who just gave his or her life. There has been controversy towards the protests because of the freedom of speech, but also there should be respect to the families that just lost loved ones. According to BBC, 9 states have approved laws that impose restrictions on demonstrations at funerals and burials. More than 20 other states are considering similar legislation. At least 14 states are considering laws aimed at the funeral protesters who at recent memorial service at Fort Campbell wrapped themselves in upside-down American flags. They danced and sang impromptu songs peppered with vulgarities and condemned homosexuals and soldiers. In conclusion, the Patriot Guard has tried to help families of fallen soldiers because they believe that it is the right thing to do.